Hi, I'm Marin. Welcome to my channel where we will be doing a deep dive into my first solo dev project, Fish in the Sea. Fish in the Sea is a metroid brainia exploration game that takes place in a world that has been abandoned after a major flood. Instead of a traditional game dev log, I'm hoping to highlight my art direction process today, from its ideation phase to its current state. This includes how the visual identity of my game relates to the themes I'm aiming to evoke, my research on the technology I'm hoping to emulate, and all of its technical execution in Godot engine. I am an extremely visually oriented person. I have a degree in a multidisciplinary field, but my primary work experience since graduating has been freelancing and graphic design. I love what I do, but I have been itching to design something of my own instead of being held to the corporate necessities of being an employed creative. I knew from the beginning that I wanted to have my game center around aquatic life. I bounced around in my head what creature the player character could be. One night, it came to me. A flying fish. I wrote it in my journal so that I wouldn't forget. I could picture it being primarily underwater, with bursts of platforming for when the player ventures to the surface. With that primary idea cemented, I went to work on designing a character for my game. I used Procreate to make a raster illustration of my character. Now that I had an illustration to work with, I decided to work on ideation for the visual identity of my game. I knew I wanted to have a retro feel, as many indie games aim for, but I also wanted it to stand out visually. There are so many wonderful pixel art games out there. The thing is, I would be new to pixel art for this project, so there's no way I would be able to create something that stands out against the extremely talented artists in our community's work. A different medium that I'm quite experienced in, however, is vector art. Vector art nowadays gets a bad rap due to the whole corporate style, but I've always loved creating with vectors in a way that I think is similar to how pixel artists paint with just little squares. There is so much more you can do in this medium than make people of a non-specific ethnicity with large bendy limbs. I have a huge passion for gouache painting in real life, and I love that I could create a similar feeling in vector with huge shapes of colors and smaller details that pop. So I began playing with putting my raster character illustration against vector backgrounds and effects to see how they would pair together. Mixing vector and raster doesn't always look great. The artist has to be intentional about the elements that they are combining. I settled on that I liked the vector elements to be for the background, particles, and lighting, while I liked the character art as raster. I think the added detail of the raster helps the fish stand out as important against the flatter shapes of the background and effects. I started experimenting with textures. As I still wanted a retro feel, I was drawn to the idea of including film grain. And then I began to think of my love of CRT TV aesthetics. Suddenly, I remembered a video by Captain Midnight, linked below, about It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia's jump from 4:3 standard definition to 1080p HD and how it changed the gritty feel of the show. I've been fascinated by the 4:3 ratio for a long time, as I love the intimate compositions that it can provide. Modern media that deviates from the 16:9 formatting is so interesting to me because it shows that the directors were so certain about the cinematography benefits for their media that they purposefully forego screen real estate. I became certain that this was the direction I wanted to take Fish in the Sea. As I previously mentioned, it's not uncommon for an indie studio to pursue retro aesthetics. To stand out from the crowd, I felt as though it wasn't enough to slap a CRT TV shader on my game and call it a day. I wanted to think of how the themes of the game's stories would complement the art direction in an interesting way, To dive a little deeper, I will give some context on my game's story. I am aiming to make a game that evokes a lot of the same feelings I had when playing Zelda 1 for the NES. Shigeru Miyamoto described his goal for the original Zelda as to evoke the feelings he had while exploring caves and forests in Kyoto. The player was free to explore in any direction, with the limitations on where to go stemming from either the player's preparedness or their skill. Along with this, the obscure secrets and hints allowed players to feel like they were discovering something that wasn't meant to be found. This was a revolutionary feeling to convey on a system as simple as the NES. It's no wonder it was the stem of such a beloved franchise. Although many subsequent Zelda games became more railroaded, Breath of the Wild brought the franchise back to its original vision. Something that I really love about Breath of the Wild is its reliance on environmental storytelling. The abandoned world is filled with ruins of a civilization left behind. So many theory videos sprung up from the nooks and crannies of this version of Hyrule. Obviously, as a solo developer, I could never dream of creating anything close to Breath of the Wild's scope. But I believe I can aim to make a game on a more intimate scale that evokes the same feelings of both loneliness and environmental wonder. Now, what does this have to do with my art direction? In my mind, the primary theme of Fish in the Sea is abandonment. I am aiming to have very little dialogue, hand-holding, or traditional narrative. What I do want to focus on is environmental and visual storytelling. I want players to wonder, where did the humans go? Why is the world flooded? What does this statue mean? I want there to be a reasonable amount of loneliness while traversing the sea, but never in a way where it feels empty or boring. The CRT TV effects enforce this feeling of abandonment because CRT TVs were by and large abandoned. They give insight into a world left behind. In and of themselves, they could be considered a clue into the timeline of the flood. Alongside the more Roman-inspired ancient abandoned set pieces in the sea, they can be included as proof of a society that isn't around anymore. I love working with the 4:3 ratio. It really aids in the feeling of discovery, as the player cannot see faraway set pieces until they are up close, which highlights the main advantage of a 4:3 composition. It is great at centering subjects in a way that feels much more intimate than widescreen can. Although the sea is vast, what matters is the player and their immediate surroundings. The closer focus can help draw attention to details that could be pertinent to solving puzzles as well. I think a big part of my inspiration for this is valuing the benefits of analog technology. People love retro aesthetics, but don't often examine why beyond simple nostalgia. The truth is, we have lost a lot along the way to make everything we do as efficient and photorealistic as possible. Just because AI can make a picture-perfect representation of the Pope roller skating through a McDonald's doesn't mean that the Pope roller skates through a McDonald's. It doesn't mean anything. Many AI prompts even focus on including the retro aesthetics that trend on social media, but they still include hyper-detailed aspects that would never appear in these art styles, either due to the technological limitations or the original artists being smart enough to know they don't need to draw each individual leaf in a tree that is on the horizon. This isn't about valuing or honoring retro aesthetics, it's stealing and bastardizing them. It doesn't mean anything. All of this to say, I want my aesthetics to mean something. I want them to be representative of the themes and feelings my players experience. I want them to be purposefully chosen and crafted. I want to understand what works about the CRT TV era games and emulate it on modern technology. So now I would like to talk a little bit about the execution of my ideas. Because I wanted this video to focus more on the intentionality of my work, I don't have quite as much to say, but I did want to give some insight into how I am executing this on Godot. Since I am not a software engineer, I did a lot of my work on the shaders through YouTube tutorials. I am going to link them in the description because I don't think that good artists gatekeep. So this shader that I have open here is my CRT TV shader. I will leave the link of the tutorial that I found the most helpful, as well as a chromatic aberration shader that I combined with this to create an effect that I'm really happy about. Here is the code that I had. A more experienced shader editor would be able to explain it a little bit better. The big thing being the warp, the scan lines, as well as creating a shader that has the film grain. So the film grain in conjunction with these isn't actually a shader, it's actually a noise texture that is randomized each frame, but it gives such a great film effect. So now I'm going to give a quick demonstration of my game and how it looks with these shaders in place. I wanted to give a little bit of explanation of some of my choices, as well as just sort of giving everybody a feel of the vibe that I'm going for. So here is my start screen. As you can see, I chose a font that works in conjunction with some of these VCR effects. It is called Press Start 2P, and I've been having a great time working with it. It really highlights the chromatic aberration effect on these edges here, and I love the way that looks. I have been making sure that the effect is more prominent in UI sections than in the game because it gets to be a little dizzying if it's on all of the player characters, but I think for UI it really highlights this type of technology. So I'm gonna hit start. Here is my loading screen. As you can see, it still follows our aesthetic. And here is my fish. Right now it's kind of in the style of a point and click. I think this was the best way to really give the freedom of rotation, as well as just leading our little fish around feels fun. Here you can see I decided to do a low poly 3D model for my merry-go-round. I still have some work to do to make it fit into the world, but I think that the low poly kind of blends in with my vector backgrounds. I thought about drawing over all the frames in vector. Right now I haven't found the time to exactly do all that, but it's a thought for it in the future. So I can spin, and here is my merry-go-round. As you can see, the background is red, so my thought was to have the jellyfish control how the merry-go-round and the Ferris wheel move. So as I move through these jellyfish, they each have their own note and light, and they control the speed of the Ferris wheel and the merry-go-round. So I have some more work to do to make this whole system a little bit smoother, but right now I'm just happy that it works at all. I'm sure a lot of game devs can relate, because getting the code to work is a monster, and we can all make it look better once it's functional. So my idea is that the lights change in conjunction with what the jellyfish tell it to do. So that one's the green one, and the green one is rather fast, and the big ones are gonna be slower. If you're wondering about the music, I composed it on beatbox. I'm not super musically inclined, but I did enjoy making stuff on beatbox. It was very intuitive. I wanted a certain feeling for the music. So I really focused on learning chord progressions of songs that I really like. So here we have my highway area. Right now I don't really have a limit on the jellyfish spawner, which is why there's a lot, but I really just wanted to give the feeling of drifting through the ocean, low energy jellyfish. I was really inspired by going to aquariums and seeing their jellyfish exhibits, where they're just kind of drifting and doing their own thing. It's so gentle, and I love the way it looks. These background field of vision lights, I really enjoyed making. I was inspired by some old music videos that had distant lights like this, and I think it just gives a fun feeling. If you're wondering about the notes that the jellyfish play, I made sure that they're all in the same chord as my background music, so they never feel too discordant. I, of all things, was inspired by Animal Crossing instruments. When you put the furniture in the room and you play the notes, they'll always go to the same tune as the song in the background, so you feel like I know how to play piano. This twirl animation was a little harder than some of the other animations, just because I had to redraw all the frames in different perspectives, but I really like the flair that it gives. If you're wondering about these particles, I was really inspired by 90s anime sparkles. That's as deep as that goes, but I really like the way it looks.
One last idea I had to test the graphical integrity of my game was to buy a second-hand CRT TV and see how it displays Fish in the Sea on the screen. I got the idea from Brandon James Greer's CRT Time, where he shows off his wonderful pixel art on a CRT monitor. I bought this lovely specimen from eBay, and after some trial and error, I got it to hook up to my computer via an HDMI to analog converter. Because of the lower resolution, I can see what jumps out as readable as well as what elements I need to work on to make them pop. Overall, I like the way my designs work on this type of screen, and it gives me confidence that I am honoring this era of technology in the right way.
Please leave a comment below if there's anything more you'd like to learn about Fish in the Sea. If you're interested in following my journey, feel free to subscribe, but no pressure. I'm leaving my link tree in the description if you'd like to follow my game devlogs on Instagram or Twitter. I try to make quicker daily updates on there, even if it's something small that I've changed. I'm hoping to reserve my YouTube channel for more high-quality examinations of my game. That way, viewers can expect a more polished explanation of my creative process here. In any case, thank you for watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.